Imagine you're sitting across from a friend who's telling you about their problems. You nod, you listen, you say the right words. But somewhere deep inside you, there's something you don't dare admit. You're not listening because you care. You're listening because you're afraid. Afraid that if you say, "I'm struggling too right now," they'll leave, and you'll be left alone. We're used to thinking of empathy as a virtue. Sensitivity, the ability to feel someone else's pain, the willingness to always be there. It all looks beautiful. But what if what you call your kindness is actually just a mask? A mask you put on so long ago that you've forgotten what your real face looks like underneath it. Carl Gustav Jung called this mask the persona, and he warned, if you wear it too long, it grows into your skin. Today we're going to talk about one of the most painful substitutions in the human psyche, the substitution of genuine compassion with the fear of being rejected. About how the unhealed empath lives trapped by their own kindness, and about how to escape that trap. To understand what happens to a person who confuses compassion with fear, we need to start with one of the key concepts in Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the concept of the persona. The word persona comes from the Latin term used in ancient Rome for the masks worn by actors in the theater. The mask told the audience what role was being played. This actor is the hero, and this one is the villain. The mask was not a face, it was a function. Jung borrowed this image to describe something that exists in every one of us. The persona is the social mask we put on to interact with the world. It's a set of behavioral patterns, facial expressions, intonations, and words that we use to meet the expectations of those around us. And here it's important to understand, the persona itself is not evil. It's necessary. We can't walk through the world completely naked, psychologically speaking. The persona helps us function in society, build relationships, work, communicate. A doctor at work behaves like a doctor. A father at home behaves like a father. This is normal adaptation. The problem begins when a person starts to identify with their mask, when the persona stops being a tool and becomes an identity. Jung wrote about this. A person who has completely merged with their persona becomes nothing more than the role they play. They lose contact with their true self, with their individuality, with their real needs and feelings. Now imagine a specific mask. Imagine the persona of someone who is always sensitive, always understanding, always ready to listen, to offer a shoulder, to put aside their own affairs for someone else. The perfect friend, the perfect partner. The person everyone describes as so kind, so caring, so attentive. A beautiful mask, isn't it? But Jung taught us to look deeper. He would ask, what hides behind this mask? What's happening in the shadow of this person? And this is where it gets truly interesting. Because behind the mask of the eternal empath, what very often hides is not kindness, but fear. A deep, early, often childhood fear of being rejected and unloved. Let's look at how this forms. Most people who in adulthood cannot distinguish their genuine compassion from the fear of being rejected acquired this pattern in childhood. There are several typical scenarios. The first, the child grew up with an emotionally unstable or emotionally unavailable parent. Love in such a family was not unconditional, but conditional. You are loved when you are convenient, when you are quiet, when you don't create problems, when you understand your mother without words and don't burden your father with your needs. The child picks up on this message very quickly and draws the only conclusion available to them. To be loved, I must sense what others need and give it to them. My own needs are a threat to love. The second scenario, parentification. This is when a child takes on the role of a parent to their own parents. Mom is crying, and the little daughter comforts her. Dad is depressed, and the son becomes his emotional support. The child becomes a little therapist in the family, and this role solidifies as part of their identity. They didn't just learn to empathize, they learned to survive through empathy. The third scenario, the experience of direct rejection. Perhaps one parent was physically absent. Perhaps the child was bullied at school. Perhaps they experienced betrayal by a close friend. The pain of rejection was so unbearable that the psyche formed a defense mechanism. I will be so kind, so sensitive, and so needed that no one will ever be able to reject me again. From the perspective of Jungian psychology, something very important is happening here. A split forms between the persona and the shadow. The persona of such a person is, I am sensitive, I am kind, I always understand others. And everything that contradicts this mask gets sent into the shadow. Anger, selfishness, the desire to say no, the need for personal space, irritation with the people they constantly have to listen to, and even a secret contempt for those they help. Jung maintained that the shadow is not something bad. It's simply what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. And the more we refuse, the more powerful the shadow becomes. The wider the smile the eternal empath wears on their face, the deeper the rage they hide inside. This is why such people sometimes snap. This is why they suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, explode. This is why, after months of selfless service to others, they may abruptly leave, disappear, or sever relationships without explanation. The shadow doesn't vanish because it's ignored. It accumulates energy. There's another painful aspect. A person with this pattern often projects their shadow onto others. Jung described the mechanism of projection in detail. What we refuse to see in ourselves, we begin to see in those around us. The eternal empath may judge others for their selfishness, for their ability to put themselves first, for being able to say no without hesitation. They may be genuinely outraged. How can someone be so indifferent? Without realizing that within that outrage lives their own suppressed desire to also have the right to indifference. This is the trap of the unhealed empath. They don't just help people. They've become addicted to helping. And like any addiction, this one is built on avoidance. Avoidance of pain, avoidance of fear, avoidance of meeting their own shadow. Now, let's look at this more practically. How specifically does the difference manifest between genuine compassion and compassion that is actually disguised fear? The first sign, guilt when refusing. A healthy person with empathy can say, I can't help you right now, and feel only mild discomfort, or feel none at all. The unhealed empath, at the mere thought of refusing, experiences real panic. Not just awkwardness, but a deep fear that refusal will destroy the relationship, that the friend will be offended, that the partner will realize they're not really that kind after all. And then, rejection, loneliness, emptiness. Pay attention. The trigger here is not someone else's pain, but one's own fear. This is a fundamental difference. Genuine compassion is directed outward, toward the other person. False compassion, based on fear, is directed inward, toward one's own anxiety. The second sign, the absence of personal boundaries. Jung spoke about the importance of individuation, the process of becoming a whole, separate individual. A person who has traveled the path of individuation has clear boundaries of their self. They know where they end and another begins. The unhealed empath has no such boundaries. They merge with the emotions of those around them. If someone nearby feels bad, they feel bad too. Not because they consciously empathize, but because they literally cannot distinguish their own emotions from those of others. They are so accustomed to defining themselves through others that without this mirror, they simply don't know who they are. The third sign, exhaustion and resentment. Since the unhealed empath can't say no, they are constantly overloaded. They take on other people's problems, other people's emotions, other people's tasks, and sooner or later, they burn out. But instead of admitting that they themselves allowed this to happen, they begin to feel a quiet resentment, bitterness toward those they help. I do so much for them and they don't even notice. No one ever asks how I'm doing. This resentment is the voice of the shadow, seeping through the cracks in the mask. The fourth sign, the need for validation. The unhealed empath doesn't just help. They need their help to be noticed and appreciated. They need feedback, gratitude, recognition, confirmation that they're good. Because if they're not thanked, that same childhood fear activates. I'm not good enough. I'm not loved. I'll be rejected. Genuine compassion doesn't need applause. It is self-sufficient. The fifth sign, the inability to accept help from others. Here's a paradox that reveals itself beautifully through a Jungian lens. A person who identifies with the persona of the one who helps cannot allow themselves to be the one who is helped, because accepting help means acknowledging their vulnerability, and vulnerability is what lives in the shadow. It's what they avoid at all costs. So the unhealed empath may be surrounded by people who genuinely want to support them and still feel completely alone because they cannot open up. Jung described this as ego inflation. When the ego identifies with a single archetype, in this case the archetype of the healer or the rescuer, it inflates and the person begins to believe that they are this role. I am the one who saves. I am the one who understands. I am the one who holds everything together. And this inflation becomes a golden cage. Jung believed that the central task of human life is individuation, the process in which a person gradually integrates all parts of their psyche, the persona, the shadow, the anima or animus, and moves toward the self, toward their true wholeness. For the unhealed empath, individuation is the path from false kindness to genuine compassion. And this path passes through several key stages. The first stage, recognizing the mask. This is perhaps the most painful moment. The person must honestly look at themselves and ask, why do I help others? What drives me? Love or fear? This demands brutal honesty with oneself, because the mask of the people-pleaser is perhaps the most pleasant mask of all. Society rewards it. People around you praise it. You're so caring, so kind.
What would we do without you? Removing a mask you're praised for is far harder than removing a mask you're condemned for. Jung wrote that the encounter with the shadow is the apprentice test on the path of individuation. And for the eternal empath, the shadow is the acknowledgement of their own selfishness, their own anger, their own exhaustion with people, their own desire to sometimes be indifferent. It's the admission that behind the mask of boundless kindness lives a person who sometimes resents those they help, who sometimes wants to be left alone, who sometimes feels not compassion, but irritation. To admit this means to face what you've been running from your entire life, to face your bad self. And here is the key Jungian paradox. It is precisely this encounter that is the beginning of healing. The second stage, integrating the shadow.
Jung did not propose destroying the shadow. He proposed getting to know it, accepting it as part of yourself. The shadow of the eternal empath is not a monster. It's simply a suppressed part of the personality that says, I too have the right to my own needs. I too have the right to say no. I too have the right to matter to myself. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean the person becomes selfish. It means they become whole. They are no longer split between the saint and the monster. They are both, and much more besides. They are a complex, multifaceted, real human being. In practice, this might look like this. The person learns to refuse without guilt, learns to say, I'm not okay right now, without feeling that it's the end of the relationship, learns to place their own needs alongside the needs of others, not above, but not below either. Learns to recognize their anger and their irritation as normal human emotions, not as evidence of their badness. The third stage, releasing the rescuer archetype. In Jungian psychology, there is the concept of identification with an archetype. When a person unconsciously takes on the role of the archetypal rescuer, they fall into a trap. They feel that without them, others won't cope, that they are responsible for the emotional state of everyone around them, that if they stop rescuing, everything will collapse. Releasing this archetype is not abandoning compassion. It's recognizing a simple but painful truth. You cannot save everyone, and you don't have to. Other people are adults. They have their own resources, their own strength, their own capacity to manage. By rescuing them without being asked, you're not helping. You're taking away their opportunity to grow. The fourth stage, the birth of genuine compassion. And here, something paradoxical happens. When a person stops helping out of compulsion, they begin to help for real. When the fear of being rejected disappears as a motivator, something else appears. A sincere, free desire to be present with another in their pain. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Jung described the self as the center of the whole psyche, as opposed to the ego, which is merely the center of consciousness. When a person approaches the self, their actions begin to come not from the ego with its fears and defense mechanisms, but from a deeper place. A place where there is both strength and vulnerability, both kindness and healthy aggression, both the ability to say yes and the ability to say no. Genuine compassion is a function of the self, not of the persona. This is perhaps the most precise formulation one can offer from a Jungian perspective. A person who has reached this level, the healed empath,
may outwardly appear even less kind. They don't rush to help everyone. They don't take on other people's problems. They can refuse. They can step away. They can speak an uncomfortable truth instead of a sweet lie. But when they choose to be present, they are truly present. Not through a mask, but face to face. Not with fear, but with love. Now I want to offer you a small inner dialogue, not a test with right answers, but a set of questions worth honestly reflecting on. You can pause the video after each one. First question. The last time I said no to someone, what did I feel? Calm or anxiety? Freedom or guilt? Second, is there someone in my life I keep helping even though I actually feel irritation or exhaustion? Why can't I stop? Third, if I stopped being sensitive and understanding, who would stay? Does this thought bring me peace or panic? Fourth, can I accept help from others as easily as I give it? Do I allow myself to be vulnerable? Fifth, is my kindness my free choice, or is it my survival strategy? If these questions caused discomfort, that's a good sign. Discomfort means you've touched something real.
Jung said, "That which does not become conscious appears in our lives as fate." As long as you don't see your mask, it will control you. But the moment you see it, you already have a choice. We started this video with the image of a person looking into a mirror and seeing a smile that isn't really on their face. Let's end with a different image. Imagine a person looking into a mirror and seeing themselves. Not the ideal version, not the mask, not who they should be, but themselves, with their kindness and with their selfishness, with their capacity to love and with their right to anger, with their sensitivity and with their right to close the door. Jung devoted his entire professional life to one idea. A person becomes whole not when they become perfect, but when they accept all of their parts, light and dark, convenient and inconvenient, socially approved and those they're ashamed of. Genuine compassion is not born from fear. It is born from freedom. From the freedom to say, I choose to be here with you, not because I'm afraid of losing you, but because I want to be here. And this is perhaps the deepest transformation available to each of us, to stop being kind and to start being real. Because, paradoxically, authenticity is the highest form of kindness. Thank you for being with me. If this video resonated, share it with someone who might need it, not out of obligation, but because you choose to. Until next time.